You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode, I spoke with Kasriel Gewirtzman, a licensed therapist working in a clinic as well as private practice and an adjunct professor at Two Rose School of Social Work. Our general topic was parenting with ADHD. The more common story to hear discussed is parents struggling with a child who has ADHD, and this appropriately gets attention here and in other venues that discuss ADHD. But there is another piece of this puzzle that also needs to be addressed. That is the challenges of a parent having their own ADHD to address. Specifically, we discussed challenges with consistency, complicated dynamics where one parent is viewed as the fun one and the other as the strict one, keeping track of household tasks and carpools, what happens when a child has ADHD as well, and they usually do, emotional dysregulation, especially when the children are teenagers and dysregulated themselves, what happens when both parents have ADHD, the value of outsourcing when possible, how challenges compound as a family grows, and a lot more. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about a podcast I listen to called the Chinuch Today Podcast. The Chinuch Today Podcast is hosted by former ADHD Heroes podcast guest, Rabbi Yerachmiel Garfield, where he speaks with innovators in the world of education who are already implementing their new ideas. So that interests you, go check that out. And on to the regular episode. Enjoy. Kasriel Gewirtzman, welcome to the ADHD Heroes Podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Me too. Happily finally got this on schedule.
Yes, me too. Okay, so let's begin with a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So originally born and raised in Brooklyn. Been around a bit since then. Lived in Israel a number of years. I was a rabbi in Ottawa, Ontario for a few years. And now I'm settled near Muncie, New York, where I work and live.
Kind of, what do you do?
I'm a mental health counselor, a licensed mental health counselor. I work partially in an agency setting and partially in a private practice.
Got it. Okay. So with that in mind, we're going to talk ADHD from the mental health counselor side of your profession.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So what are the general challenges that parents who have ADHD face in parenting?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one, right? Because as we know, there's a strong genetic component to ADHD. If a child has ADHD, there's a very significant chance that at least one of the parents is going to share their diagnosis as well. In fact, a lot of my clients, that's really how the parents ended up recognizing their own ADHD, was while they were going through that assessment process with their child, they kept telling the doctor, the therapist, the neuropsych, whoever was doing the evaluation, I don't know, I think that's regular. I've been dealing with that my whole life. And at some point, the person might turn to them and go, well, there might be a reason for that. So among the challenges that I see is there's a lot. And of course, ADHD, like all forms of neurodivergence, there's a massive spectrum of how it's going to manifest. And we're going to talk about that. But there's a number of different ways it affects parenting. So first of all, on a basic level, people with ADHD tend to struggle with consistency, right? That's kind of, if I could give a bumper sticker version of ADHD, it's kind of just performing consistently inconsistent all the time, right? And so they're going to have good days, they're going to have bad days, they're going to have worse days, like everyone, but the highs and lows tend to be a little higher and the lows tend to be a little lower. And obviously as a parent, that's really, really hard, right? If you have the child has all of their demands, the demands of the school, cooperating with the school, cooperating with the child, cooperating with managing other siblings, managing household tasks, employment, etc. And all of that is really, really complicated when you're struggling to sustain attention on a consistent basis. So that's I'd say like broad strokes where it's going to show up in the ADHD parenting.
Right. Got it. Okay, so getting into a little more detail, What are differences between the challenges a father will have versus challenges a mother will have?
So there's many differences, and I obviously don't want to stereotype. I'm gonna kind of just share what I've noticed, with people I know, with clients of mine.
Right.
I think there's a lot's going to depend on what their roles are in terms of how much responsibility they're juggling in the house, how much responsibility they're juggling out of the house. But in, let's call it a more traditional male female breakdown where the man is spending less of his time with the household tasks and the mother is often juggling a job in addition to doing more of the household tasks, where it's going to come up a lot is, when the father is often going to be the fun one, right? So if the father has ADHD, he's kind of going to be the fun dad, right? Which is great, in the sense that he's kind of spontaneous. He's like, hey, let's go for ice cream at 7:30 p.m. in January, right? And he's like, let's go on adventures, let's go on trips, right? And mom is kind of in that scenario where she's the more neurotypical and he's the more ADHD. She's kind of stuck as like the not fun one, going, no, we can't do that. Limit setting, boundary. And then that ends up in kind of a really unpleasant dynamic, right? Where the father looks like the great one, the mother looks like, hey, I'm just trying to keep house here, trying to keep life going, trying to stay functional. I'm recognizing the kid needs to go to school the next day. I'm recognizing that kid does horrible with sugar. I'm recognizing that it's Muncie in January. There isn't even an ice cream place open. But are kind of stuck, playing that role. That's one way we'll look up, and that's for sure a lot of parents and a lot of couples I've dealt with that presentation. Now, this is just to switch to the mom for a moment. This has just been my experience. I don't know the numbers offhand, and in my practice, I work mostly with couples and a little bit with parents and occasionally children as necessary. But my practice has really become very couple focused over the past few years. Um, I've noticed most of the women I work with that would have the ADHD diagnosis would be more what we call ADHD inattentive,
Right.
which, or just, I assume listeners of your podcast are familiar, but just to run through it just for a second, there's ADHD inattentive, there's ADHD hyperactive, and there's ADHD mixed. So ADHD inattentive is what we used to call, when back in the day, ADD, attention deficit disorder, where you're kind of minus that hyperactive part. The way I like to say for kids is, he's the kid that no one notices is ADD because he's kind of just staring out the window, bothering nobody, right? And the hyperactive is the one that, like, the kids' parents are getting called 3 times, and it's like September 4th, because he's out of the house, he's out of his seat, he's running around, right? So in my experience, and again, I don't work a lot with individual women. More women I've worked with have ADHD inattentive rather than hyperactive. So where it's going to show up is in terms of managing the house. It's going to show up in terms of, right, there's a big cognitive load in parenting. There's, did the kid do their homework? Did the kids' homework get signed? Did the kids' laundry get done? Did the kids' laundry get put away? And so on and so forth. So many of the moms that I've worked with are really struggling with that element of it. And then if you combine with the fact that often there's that ADHD child in the mix, right? So it's kind of like we need the parents to really be setting boundaries and really be very organized style of parenting for that consistency that the ADHD brain struggles to supply for itself, but really needs to stay regulated. And so it becomes a very big challenge when mom is struggling with those executive function challenges and with those emotional regulation challenges.
Okay, next. What tends to change at different life stages? Meaning you're describing, let's say, mom doing the kids' laundry. At the point where the kid's old enough to do their own laundry, there could be other stuff going on. So different life stages, there'll be different challenges. So how do those tend to change as kids get older?
Of course, and yeah, there's always going to be, parenting. I haven't come across many people where it's become easy.
Right.
Doesn't seem to become easier as the child gets older. It just becomes more complicated. That old standard line is an old standard line for a reason. Little kids, little problems. Big kids, big problems. Right. So where will often happen is first of all, mom. Let's say in this scenario, we'll still be struggling with these emotional regulation things, right? So there's a big element of ADHD that I think is very misunderstood, which is people with ADHD tend to have very big emotions. They tend to have a harder time moderating themselves, very easily insulted, can go very big, can go very high. So as you kind of have this fun mix of the kid's hormones and turning into a teenager, and all that kind of natural developmental stuff, um, now you're having mom or dad. It could be either. Not to pick on anyone here. Dealing with some big emotions of their own while trying to co-regulate with a kid. So that's going to be really complicated. The executive function stuff just continue to get more complicated, right? Like I'm thinking of Muncie, right? I'm raised in Brooklyn. By sixth grade, seventh grade, the kids are going out on their own a lot. I was biking to school in sixth grade. Muncie or else you, I don't know, happen to live in Forche and send to YSV, the kids are not really making their way back and forth to school on their own, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of pickups, there's a lot of carpools, there's a lot of play dates, and that often becomes the parents' problem, right? We're running, taxi services, ferrying around, so that remains a very big problem. So I'd say emotional regulation, executive function continue to be a struggle, just a slightly different flavor.
Are there differences in parenting boys versus girls when the parents have ADHD?
So to be clear, the parents being the ADHD or the
Yeah,
child in this scenario, the
the parents.
parents.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great question. I can't say I've necessarily noticed a big difference, other than the fact that the when the child is an ADHDer as well, like I mentioned earlier, the girl is going to be more likely to be inattentive, and the male
right.
is going to be more likely to be hyperactive.
Right.
But otherwise, I have not seen an enormous difference, except, and this is important, which parent is going to kind of naturally bear more of the load, right? I think very often when as a male gets older, there's a lot more things that the father now has to take upon himself, right? Learning with the child, arranging the bar mitzvah preparations, you know, all of those types of conversations need the father's involvement. And with a girl, you're going to kind of have that flip side very often. So I'd say that's where the gender difference would come in terms of who's going to kind of be more naturally responsible for each child, if that makes sense. But I can't say I've thought a great deal about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, how does this get compounded when both parents have ADHD?
Yeah, so that could be a mess, literally and figuratively, right?
Right.
So it's often very tricky because it could go either which way. There's an outstanding book of about ADHD and couples work, which I'm totally blanking on right now.
Melissa Orlov?
Yes, of course. So she has two different books. One of them was written like with a professional, and one's written maybe with her husband. I forget exactly. And you know, there's I think a couple of different styles of, let's call it, double ADHD couples. There's one where kind of they both are really struggling, and I'm going to get to that in a second. What I've really come across is an interesting dynamic where they both will have ADHD, but one kind of overfunctions and becomes kind of the more neurotypical spouse, compounded with the resentment of I have ADHD as well, and somehow I'm managing to keep house and I'm managing to manage life while you're totally, not reliable and not, you know, doing your fair share around the house or doing your fair share with the children, etc. So regarding the couple where they're both struggling, so it is very interesting in the sense that I'm going to say something maybe a little funny. A lot of ADHD struggles can be managed with money.
Okay.
Okay, so if a couple is clever enough, or God grants them somehow the financial abilities, a lot of the ADHD struggle can really be covered in that way. And by that I mean, yeah, have, you know, cleaning help 4 or 5 days a week. Outsource your booking schedule to a secretary. Um, you know, have a personal shopper go pick up your groceries because it's too overwhelming, right? There's a lot of different ways where when the finances are there, the struggle is not going to be as intense. right? And it's maybe it sounds counterintuitive, or right, but it's that doesn't mean the struggle won't be there. But there are a lot of ways and techniques and interventions that really become much simpler when there's adequate cash flow running through the family, right? Where it gets really tricky is where there isn't, and there's resentment plus all these organizational pieces that still need to happen. I've seen patients, I've seen in other contexts other people where the house is a total wreck, and the person is kind of running around looking for that one piece of paper that they need in order to apply for something, and it's here somewhere among the 10,000 pieces of paper, right?
Oh,
um, that becomes really really tricky. It often becomes really really resentful, and often what I would recommend, just to like go to the couple aspect of it, and I know you've had some episodes focusing on the couple aspect, but that's where each spouse really does have the responsibility to try to get treated to their utmost, and that could mean a lot of different things, and to try to get control of the chaos in that way, because it's tough for parenting, it's tough for a relationship, it's tough for financials, and it's hard watching people suffer like that.
yes, it is. How do things get compounded as the family grows?
Yeah, so this is tricky, right? Because I think every struggle becomes a little more complicated as the family grows, right? So just as like a silly example, people with ADHD often struggle with sleep tremendously. This is again, I'm sure you must have touched on it. I haven't listened to all the episodes, but right, one of the most common elements that I see with my clients is a very delayed sleep pattern times two. So really delayed falling asleep, really delayed waking up.
Right.
Extremely common, tossing and turning, insomnia till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, literally. And then naturally that has some downsides on the flip side, right?
Yeah.
So when a couple's like newly married, depending on what they're up to in life, and maybe they have that one cute kid that chills with them, and they could sleep late, it might not be amazing. I'm sure there's definitely some bosses, some colels, some colleges that might look down on that type of practice,
Right.
but it's not necessarily catastrophic. But now when you compound that with like dad sleeping late, mom's dealing with a new baby, and there's a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, and 14-year-old, and 6-year-old that all need to somehow have their knapsack packed that somehow didn't happen the night before, looking for the clean set of socks, um, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It just becomes really, really complicated. It leads to a lot of blame, a lot of confusion, a lot of overwhelm. And so that's often how it does show up, compounding a lot as the family grows.
Got it. Okay, so we've identified a lot of problems.
Yeah. If I could just add one more point. One thing that does often help sometimes as the family grows, but comes with its own set of problems. I've seen a lot of times that an older kid becomes like a very over functioning parentified child,
Right.
right? Where it sort of becomes like, oh, I'm the 14-year-old girl. It's my responsibility to make sure the 6-year-old and 8-year-old make their way out in the
Right.
morning, which is great because the kid's getting to school, but often has a lot of consequences later down the road.
Right. So you're saying getting for the functioning of the house in the moment, it
It
works
might
well.
be a good thing, but
Right.
again, because I work with adults and couples, and that often there's a lot of resentment, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s of like, I never really had a chance to be a child. I've pretty much been a co-parent since I'm 13, 14. And of course, that could happen in all sorts of households, but I've definitely seen it happen in the ADHD/double ADHD household.
Right. Got it. So turning towards more solutions. All right. What can we do to help people, or what can we do to help people with all these different challenges?
Wow. So I just took a big breath there. I think that's really a good first step. Not get overwhelmed. Slowly breathe in, breathe out. Recognize there are solutions for almost everything we've mentioned.
Right.
Right. Would you prefer to start with like looking at it from the child perspective, the parenting perspective? How would you? Where should
Let's
we take this?
start from the parenting.
Yeah, let's go with the parenting. So the parents are going to need more support, and recognizing that is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. You know,
Right.
there's a lot of, I think it's very popular to like look down on our generation and like we didn't need to use all these newfangled styles of support back in the day. And
Right.
I think that maybe is true, and we could maybe spend some time on that at some point. But really, it's been a huge bracha in terms of a lot of support available for parents that are handling these type of challenges. So I'd start off with, I think the first step is get treatment, recognize and get treatment, right? So I'm not going to belabor the point, but there's certain pillars of ADHD treatment. Obviously it's each person's personal choice, but medication can be really, really game changer for the right people. Doesn't mean it doesn't have downsides, but I've many a time worked with a couple, diagnosed one of them with ADHD, sent them for a medication evaluation, got them started on medication, and just seen remarkable results. I remember one wife came in like a few weeks later, and she's like, "I don't know, it's crazy. I'm super wifey all of a sudden," which was her cute way of saying like, suddenly the whole household doesn't feel like this overwhelming, crushing mess that I've been dealing with for so long, right? So medication could be a big part. Adequate sleep is really important. Nutrition, particularly protein. I don't fully understand this. I'm not a biochemist, but protein seems to be vital for the ADHD brain, and counterintuitively seems to be a real struggle for them to get it. So that's a really important piece of prioritizing like protein. Exercise is huge. So I'd say that's like one of the main pillars. Many of the most functional, least impacted by ADHD parents and people that I know kind of stumbled into an intense exercise routine.
Meaning like it happened by accident, like they got into an exercise routine and they're like, whoa, how did I
Yeah, exactly. In other words, sometimes it was just like something silly, like I don't know, they decided to bike for high, or they're suddenly like, wow, I've gone up 3 shirt sizes since my wedding, and I only got married 2 years ago,
right.
and they decided to start exercising, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, we're having some effect. I've seen studies that seem to indicate as minimal as 12 to 15 minutes of exercise has equivalent effects to the effect of ADHD medication for up to 5 hours after exercise.
Whoa.
Right, so that's a big deal. I mean, ADHD medication statistically is one of the most well studied and well evidence based of all the psychiatric medications. And you're saying by putting on your sneakers and going for a brisk walk for 12 to 15 minutes, you're getting a similar um, response. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So that's something that I theoretically am passionate about. Obviously, as a mental health counselor, that's not usually my role, although we do sometimes look a little at lifestyle. But that's going to be a really important thing. So this is going to be true for mom and dad. Exercise, protein, sleep, adequate nutrition, and possibly medication can be really useful. Focus coaching, that makes a big difference, right? And by coaching, I mean this could be potentially with a licensed therapist, this could be with an ADHD coach, where we get really brass tacks, right? The ADHD brain tends to flit around very quickly from thing to thing, and it doesn't tend to kind of finish any one task, right?
Right.
That's really a challenge as a parent and trying to run a household and or a business and or a life, right? So ADHD coaching, where they design really structured goals and really specific systems, right? It makes it much, much easier. Right. I had a client once that told me a hack that like I laughed, but honestly it's genius. He's like many men, he wears pants sometimes for more than one day, right? So he's like, I will never take the stuff in my pocket out until I am putting on my next pair of pants. So he's like, boom, that entire ADHD struggle of, oh my God, I got to get out of the house. Oh my God, where's my keys?
Right.
Gone. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's actually genius. And I've been recommending that to clients ever since. Right.
Right.
And that's an example of just a pretty stupid hack that can reduce endless frustration. So yeah, that I think is a really, really important piece for the ADHD parenting.
Right. These little tweaks can go a very long way.
Yeah.
For those who always say that they want to eat better, they want to sleep better, they want to exercise. It's hard for everybody. It's extra hard with ADHD brain. Are there things you have seen that have helped people work it into their routine somehow?
Absolutely. So yeah, and again, I think it's a struggle for everybody. I
Yeah.
think we pretty much live in a society engineered to not do any of those goals.
Right.
Um, right, in terms of exercise, nutrition, sleep. But on a really basic level, for sure, when I'm working with an individual client, I try to choose one thing to focus on, and I try. This is maybe a little untraditional. I try to really try it with them once. Okay, so for example, exercise, huge fan of it. Right, in one of my offices, it's near a park, which I will not divulge for HIPAA reasons. And if the client's okay, we have a consent process that we go through. I'll sometimes do a walk and talk session with them.
Oh,
Okay.
that's, yeah.
And the ADHD brain loves that, not needing to do direct eye contact, moving, thinking. And for those who are interested, actually look it up. It's a thing, walk and talk therapy. It's interesting. There's books out there, there's some research. But it's also a win-win in the sense that the client now had a 40-minute walk with me. And then I could kind of, as we're walking back to the office, just go, hey, how's your brain feeling?
Right.
What's happening there? Right?
Right.
Same thing with nutrition. I have no problem saying, like, bring in your yogurt. Yeah, eat your yogurt while we're talking, for sure, right?
Right.
And so that's often a first step of we all struggle to change towards things that we don't understand the payback for,
Right.
right? It sounds pretty basic, but it's true. Like, you know, when I want to eat the cookie, I know what I'm getting when I eat a cookie. It's crunchy, it's sweet, it's delicious, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the cookie, I guess. But um, with exercise, with nutrition, I don't really know the kind of the payback. So I want to make it as fun as possible. Actually, a friend of mine just mentioned to me that they're playing around with this app. I don't even remember what it's called, which basically gamifies eating. Okay. So what it basically does is, and looks like maybe you've heard of it, but it basically, you take a picture of everything you're eating. It gives you a protein breakdown and a calorie breakdown. And it gives like a little swallow thing. You name what you are. So like you could choose a little cute animal or something. This person named their thing Schmilly. And they're basically like every couple of hours they get a pop-up reminder to eat, drink water.
Oh, that's very good.
Right. And it's not perfect because the ADHD brain usually has 200 unopened reminders on their screen, right?
Right.
But it's these are small things that you're like, oh, interesting, right? And then I really like to catch the glimmer of positivity with them, right? So let's say that super wifey back, going back earlier, right?
Right.
She had started on medication 2 weeks earlier, and until I was like, oh, seems like the medication is maybe having some effect, she had not made the connection at all,
Oh, that's
right?
interesting.
It
Right.
is, yeah. The brain is fascinating, and so I kind of go like that. Hey, so we choose a goal. Are we getting a little more protein this week? Are we trying to move 3 times a week? And then we kind of check in next week. We're like, hey, what happened? And this is really important. Like we mentioned, the gamify aspect. Pair it with something that's genuinely fun, right?
Right.
I don't like exercising. Like where we're recording in my office, I have my treadmill next to me. I'll do it sometimes.
Right.
It's not fun,
Right.
but I do know at about the 12-minute mark, suddenly I'm going to start feeling pretty good, right?
Right.
But what if I meet up with some friends for a pickup basketball game, right?
Yeah.
What
It's fun, and you get the accountability also. There are people waiting for you.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And one of the modalities I'll use is acceptance and commitment therapy, right? Like trying to live our life in alliance with our values, right? Okay, it's hard for you. I get it. Do you enjoy running around with your kids because you're connecting with your kids and you're giving them that good time? Okay, so Sunday you're going to go play football in your backyard with them. Boom, one day checked off, right?
That's very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there ways to I know Jeff Copper, I think it's his idea, to keep a cup of nuts handy in the car for those who don't have allergies in the
Yeah,
family.
so I love that. I also always, honestly, this is true for all busy adults, to be frank and honest. But I think this is vital for the ADHD brain. I'm a big fan, not from ADHD context, James Clear, right? Atomic Habits,
Right.
and great book. And he has like one really good, you cite, if I could like oversimplify his whole book, which is basically the thing you want, make it easy. The thing you don't want, make it really hard. Right? I always make fun the standard from household. You walk in, what's on the kitchen counter?
Lots of food.
Yeah,
Cookies.
but specifically, there's that like nice Hungarian cake on the counter, like
Okay.
set on that beautiful glass situation, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And where's the apples? The apples are buried like in the bottom of the fridge in the fruit drawer, where it's then taken out to be thrown out to be replaced with the next set of apples, right?
Yes. Yes. Right.
We got to flip that. So, yeah, you got to think, right? I always tell people stick a tub of yogurt by work.
Right.
I love peanut butter. So, for me, peanut butter. Stick a peanut butter by work, right? Now, if you're stuck, if you mix peanut butter and yogurt together, you're
Right.
getting about 22 grams of protein and a pretty decent snack,
Right. They
right?
taste good together.
They're not bad together. At least I like it, but I like peanut butter. And then if you're feeling really adventurous, you crumple in some Rice Krispies or something, right? Come for the ADHD, stay for the recipes. But
Right.
the point is there's ways we can plan ahead, right? In a way, that's a simple thing. If I remember once to bring the yogurt and the peanut butter to work, and I label it private, blah blah, right? I,
Right.
I'm now set that when come heck or high water, I have something that will get me through some basic protein. Nuts in the car, of course, like you mentioned, that's a tremendous idea. Hummus in the fridge. Even just again, I'm assuming like I'm thinking where I work at Achieve, like it's great. We have a freezer there. Stick a frozen sourdough or whole wheat bread, right? If you have that and the peanut butter and the yogurt, you have the makings of a very decent meal always,
Right.
right? Yeah, so that's a big one. I have another one. Honestly, I do this myself, and I share this with clients, and I think it's amazing.
Right.
Your gym bag should be in your car always,
Oh, that's good.
right? Sometimes
Right.
you're gonna have to take out your shirt because hopefully you sweated it up enough, right?
Right.
But if you know, okay, I have 35 minutes to run to the gym, to just run around by work outside while making a quick phone call. Boom, I got my walking sneakers. I'm ready to roll. Make it easy, and then it's going to happen.
Right. Very good.
Yeah.
What is something that grandparents or aunts and uncles can do that is helpful but not too helpful?
I love it. I love the framing. Um, I think this is true for parents and grandparents and aunts and uncle, depending obviously on the tightness of the family system, right? If the grandparents are the type that they send a check by Hanukkah, and that's about the extent of the relationship, this isn't going to really work.
Right.
I like to think of scaffolding support, right? So there is things that can help someone with the ADHD brain, whether it's the parents, whether it's the child, just function better in the world, right? So, for
Right.
example, some of the stuff I mentioned that could be done with money is
Right.
a really good example. And again, it's tricky. People are tricky. People get insulted, right? There are
Right.
some families this totally won't fly, but in
Right.
some families, like sending over a cleaning lady once a week,
Right.
like that could be massive. It could also go really badly.
Right.
I'll just be very transparent.
Right.
But that can be a really useful thing. But I think in general, scaffolding, right? So in the terms of, I'm not looking to reach up and take the apple off the tree for you,
Right.
but I'm looking to help you get up there and take the apple off the tree, right?
Right. Right.
So it can be for paying. It can be through paying for stuff. It can be running through tasks that like are just totally overwhelming for the person. It can be being an accountability partner in a situation where like that's okay and would be appreciated, and that's subtle and tricky. Yeah, so it's sometimes maybe giving a kid a ride to school. That's an example of a kid can't do that on their own, right? So I don't think that's being too helpful. I think that's just being helpful without being too helpful.
Right. So sometimes offering a hand on one of those tasks that requires a little extra executive function or standard executive function. And
Yes. Yeah, and especially because the ADHD brain kind of melts down faster than other brains. So when the ADHD brain knows that they have a lot of tabs open, no tabs happen,
right,
right? So there's
yes,
this ADHD overwhelm or this shutdown of like, oh my god, I need to take this kid here, go there. I need to drop off my right, like I need to drop off something to the dry cleaners, right? To the neurotypical brain, that is the simplest thing in the world that you drop off at like, you know, you're on the way to the 9 o'clock chakras and you drop it off and like you're still by chakras by 8:58 with the drop off, right? Whereas the ADHD brain struggles through every part of it. What suit do I need cleaned? Oh, I need to get it to my car. Okay, I got it to my car. Amazing. Oh, the dry cleaner's closed. Oh, right. So often knowing that I have to do a bunch of things prevents the ADHD brain from doing anything. So sometimes taking a couple of key tasks off can really be helpful.
right, excellent. If someone with ADHD has their first child on the way, what's one valuable piece of advice you want to give them to get ready?
So first, I'm going to say one unvaluable piece of advice. Okay,
Okay,
if
okay,
that's okay. I still
please.
remember before we had our first child, we were by a friend of ours who actually the wife, I think, was training for the same degree as I am, as you know, the licensed mental health counselor. And I just remember, like, my wife was like 7 months pregnant, and she's like, "Oh, read a book. You're never gonna read a book again."
That's funny. Okay,
Right? And meaning to say, A, it's a hilarious story, so I had to share it. But also B, your life's gonna be okay. It's gonna be you're gonna adjust. It's happened before. It will work out for you.
right,
Some tips to keep in mind is all the same ADHD supports are going to still be necessary after the baby, combined with the fact that if the wife is the one with ADHD, hormones and hormonal changes and nursing and lack of sleep all take the ADHD symptoms to the roof.
right.
And we just need to acknowledge that, and we have to price that in. I also just want to mention this because I was reminded this by a colleague recently. Most pregnant women and nursing women, if they're on stimulants for sure, are unmedicated.
Right,
Most OBs, again, consult your local Orthodox doctor, right?
right,
But many OBs and psychiatrists are very hesitant to prescribe stimulants and some non-stimulants to pregnant and nursing women. So they're managing more stress, more hormones, less sleep, less support. It is a tough recipe. So I'd say keep in mind things will be okay. Take whatever support is offered. Don't be too proud. If your neighborhood does meal trains, don't be like, oh, we only have one kid. We don't need a meal train. Take the meal train. If mom wants you to move in and be taken care of and pampered for a few weeks, absolutely take it. Do whatever you can to prioritize sleep as much as possible. It's not always right. I always joke around like I'm mostly a couples therapist, right? If the woman is nursing, it's very nice to get up to provide moral support, but
right.
you also have to decide, do you need to wake up 3 times a night for that, right? So there's kind of that element of keep in mind both people's brains need to be as sharp as possible. The husband and wife, the new parents, they're going to be running on little sleep. They're going to be dealing with a lot of emotional changes. It's normal for it to be a tough time and it's going to pass.
Do you ever hear people say ADHD is, quote unquote, not real? If you do, what do you say and what do you want to say?
So I think sometimes my feeling is like those, online memes of like, hold me back. Um, but
Okay.
I think all kidding aside, I really do understand them,
Right,
right? The people that say it's not real. Um, there's no blood work that confirms ADHD.
right.
There's some minimal brain scan evidence, minimal, depending how you squint, right?
Okay.
That has some speculation of possibly differentiating ADHD from other things. I really do understand them. And the truth is, like, the literature sort of points back to different case studies going back 120 years, right? but it's a relatively recent discovery, so to speak. So I really do understand their skepticism, and even like the DSM, I believe, I don't have my notes in front of me. I think the first time it entered as a diagnostic criteria was 1990.
I think
That's
under
not
that name. I think it had a bunch of different names before.
okay, but I
Sorry.
believe yeah, we could go on that, but it's not as these things go, it's not an extraordinary long time. Things like depression, anxiety, etc. Right? They've been around. People understand them. You can find mentions in Chazal, in ancient writings. Like it makes sense. So now that I over argued the other side, I mean, but at the same time, I think it's quite clear it is a thing. It's quite clear it's a real problem. That Russell Barkley, who I don't necessarily agree with everything he's ever written, which is fine. I'm not sure even he would agree with everything he ever wrote at this point, but he does marshal pretty incredible array of statistics of what happens to the untreated ADHD person.
Yeah.
So you're probably more familiar with them than I am, but there's a significantly higher rate of dropping out of school, starting from the very earliest ages, juvenile delinquency, law enforcement involvement, drug use, pretty much every form of addiction. Even the likelihood of being abused, I think I've seen statistics is considerably higher. Divorce. And to top it all off, once we do the depressing tour through the lifespan, the average person with ADHD tends to live almost 7 years less than the average life expectancy in the US. So it seems pretty convincing that it's a problem and that it's here and it's an issue. Um, and I don't think ignoring it I don't think ignoring it, makes it not an issue. I will say what I think is, in my experience, makes it more complicated is I think, and I don't think this is a tremendous, groundbreaking point. I think it's both criminally over and underdiagnosed, right? I think there's people who probably should not be diagnosed with ADHD, who are diagnosed with ADHD, and you have the flip side. You have people who really were totally missed. I mean, I've diagnosed clients in their high 20s, early 30s with ADHD, and so it's kind of really understandable that it gets lost in the shuffle, but at the same time, it's waving it away and saying it's not a problem doesn't make it go away as a societal problem.
Right. Yeah, very good. What is a message of hope you can leave our listeners with?
So I think what I would really say is, look, I don't love the whole ADHD is a superpower framing.
Right.
As one of my clients once made fun, like if that's a superpower, like I'm giving back my cape, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of truth to it. The stuff that make the ADHD brain challenge, challenging and challenged, it does have advantages, and we live in a very fast paced world, and in many ways, sometimes the ADHD brain can really be very well equipped for that. So the message of hope I'd really say is, by and large, the kids with ADHD, if they make it through the school environment without completely having their personality destroyed, without completely having their self esteem torn down, they tend to be very well suited for life outside of yeshiva,
Right.
right? And even sometimes in yeshiva at a certain age, right? Like I was just by I guess a training. I don't even know where I was, and I was sitting in the place for about 2.5 hours straight,
Right.
right? And I was thinking, I don't know the last time as an adult I was forced to sit for 2.5 hours straight,
Right.
right? We have some freedom as adults that children don't necessarily get, right?
Yeah.
And so, what I would say is my message of hope is get the kid through school, get the support that you can. He's going to do great in life. I really, really believe most of the people who have driven tremendous change, both in the Jewish community and out, many to most of them would be diagnosed with ADHD if we had met them early enough. And I think every chesed organization ever was founded by someone with ADHD. I think a lot of great schools, a lot of great institutions, a lot of great chesed and situations were created by people with ADHD who just have that ability to leap from thing to thing, to kind of get really hyper focused on a particular problem and beat it to death. So I think they're tremendous assets to society. They bring a lot of fun, a lot of spontaneity, a lot of entertainment to the world. So I think that the prognosis is great as long as we could get the support. And so that's really what my closing message is. Get the support that you need, and God willing, it's all going to work out very well.
Excellent. Okay, how can people get in touch with you?
So I have a Psychology Today under my name, Kasriel Gewirtzman. My email address is, I'll spell it out, but it's K Gewirtzman, so GEWIRTZMAN @gmail.com. I'm available at my private practice. I'm available for consultation. I'm available to provide mini trainings on couples work and ADHD, separated, comma in between, or not. And I'm actually looking a new thing that I'm looking to slowly expand more of is couples intensives for couples that don't have time, energy to be coming in for an hour of couples work a week and slowly progressing, but want to really make progress quickly. So I'm going to be offering 2 and 3 day intensives in the Muncie area to really just take couples from a really not great place to a much better place. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else you wanted to mention?
No, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.